something to be mindful of when everything is going really well, and not to like be pessimistic and be like, oh, the other shoe's going to fall or whatever, but orchestrate your life and build yourself up in such a way that when the hard things come, you are better equipped to deal with them.
Welcome to the Carla Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and as my videographer was coming in, he's setting up the camera for me, and I said, man, that was such a great interview. I just love talking to Natalie. Natalie Walter and we just have a lot in common, and yet, just the more I get to know her, the more I love her. I love her heart. She's so articulate, and she's trained, and it's just been wonderful to have these conversations with her. And of course, we partner with the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center as well with my business, Power Fitness. So she's the executive director of that. So it's really cool just to see, as in this partnership, we're able to connect more, and we're kind of forced to connect more. And man, has that ever been a blessing to me, just getting to know her heart, getting to know the way that she's serving this community. I know that you'll be blessed by this interview, and let's get into it. All right, well, I'm really happy to have Natalie Walter on here with me. So Natalie, thank you so much for being on the Carla Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I think that's fun to say. Yeah.
Yes,
thank you.
Exactly. That's a good thing to say. So Natalie, people are probably like, okay, well, who is this girl? I'm going to introduce you a little bit, and then I'll let you kind of share more. So the first thing about Natalie is, well, the thing that's connected us is the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center, because you are the executive director of the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center. And I connected with you because I wanted to partner with you and be able to support the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center through my Power Fitness company. And that was a really good fit, and I'm excited that I can do that. So that's kind of how we connected. But can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? So you do the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center. Give us a little bit more context. Who is Natalie Walter? What do you do? It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question, and it's I don't know, where do you even start, right? So Natalie Walter, I was born Natalie Lorio, so that Walter's a new addition. Well, I guess I've been a Walter almost as long as a Lorio now.
Yeah, how long have you been married for?
It'll be 18 years in a couple months here, in December.
Oh, okay. So we're really close. I think I've been married just a little bit longer than you guys.
So you guys had your 18th already this year?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember actually while I'm talking to you, which sounds really bad. I'm like, what? Yeah, 18 years in August. So you got married. Yeah. So super close.
At the end of the year, which it was such a, it's so funny because we think back on when we initially got married, we're like, oh, let's have a winter wedding. It'll be amazing. We got married December 21st, which is actually such a nightmare for a ministry couple because we often forget that it's our anniversary until my mother-in-law texts us happy anniversary. And we're like, oh no. But thankfully we're both really low maintenance, low key people. And we're we high five and then we kind of move on with the day. Just because December 21st in the church world is crazy. It's you're setting up for Christmas Eve service or whatever. And so
yeah,
awesome timing.
Yeah. So, cause you're a pastor's wife. You're a mom.
Yes.
And go ahead.
I work almost full time. I'm also a university student.
Still?
Still, yeah.
Oh,
it's
wow.
unending. Yeah.
What are you taking?
Well, I'm majoring in sociology right now, so that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
And just some of the hats that I wear, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, before we hit record, you were telling us about your schedule. So can you share with everyone kind of what you do, what time you get up, and then how your day starts? I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, my day starts at 5:15. Although I got to tell you, I naturally wake up at 4:30, and so I'm always trying to make myself fall asleep. But it's really hard for that last 45 minutes because it's the alarm's going to go off.
I know that.
So I'm usually up at 4:30, but I don't roll out of bed till 5:15, and then it's gear up for a run and head outside. And now I'm putting on my headlamp because it's so dark out. And I'll run for an hour and then I'll come back home and it's take a quick shower and then the day just starts, right? It's as soon as the kids are up, the day just explodes and then it doesn't stop until nighttime, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're busy packing lunches, making sure everyone remembers their laptops now, which we've had a few days where because the laptops at school are new. It's making sure everyone's got their stuff, feeding the dogs, running the coffee through the coffee maker, because if I don't bring like 2 liters of coffee with me to work, it's just not going to happen for me.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and so it's just a really quick start to the day. And then once I get to the office, it's a really quick day at the office. And then when I get home, it's a really quick evening at home where it's like make dinner, clean up for dinner, like again, trying to clean up kids' lunches and make sure homework is done. And so I honestly, like, the weeks go by so quickly, the days go by so quickly, it's chaotic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, tell me what it's like. I'm really curious about this because I've often thought of pastors' wives and I'm like, wonder what it's like to be a pastor's wife. Like when the pastor's up there, like he's preaching the sermon and you're sitting there, are you like, oh man, like he's talking about that because like, do you feel like he's preaching at you sometimes? Or does it, like, how does
I
it
think
feel?
yeah, I think you would think that was dangerous to preach to me. Oh, buddy, we have to drive home together.
Wives submit to your husbands.
Yeah, yeah, he's never said that.
Okay.
But thankfully, yeah, I just, it's interesting. The pastor's wife label, I think, can be a pretty dangerous thing. So I try not to think about it too often. And
Mhm.
our church is very gracious. They don't bring it up very often either.
Mhm.
And so I'm very thankful.
So
I
what's
think what,
oh.
sorry, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, what's the label? What is it? Does it feel heavy somehow, or like what is it about that label that maybe either bothers you or is just it's just more difficult or whatever? I'm just curious.
I think depending on the church, it can feel pretty heavy. It depends on what the expectations are.
Mhm.
And so that is something I honestly feel like the first, like, I don't know, 10 years of our marriage was trying to like figure out that role and that title and where I land on it.
Mm.
I feel like it's like one of the very few jobs that are out there where he has this job and I'm so intricately tied to it, even though it's like not warranted in any way. Like I just married this guy and he happens to do this thing. And then people like, there's like all of these ties to it, right? Where it's like these expectations and
Right.
so I think really like the first 10 years was all about like the first 10 years of us being in vocational ministry was all about um, how to deal with feedback, like really like good feedback or negative feedback. The good feedback is almost as difficult to receive as the bad feedback because it's tentative. It can really change depending on how you responded to something or your behavior, or if you're too aloof or if you're too outgoing or if you're it's almost like a bit of a tightrope walk depending on the church that you're in, and so that part can be really difficult.
Mm.
But the church we're in now is the best one we've been in yet, where it's just like no one brings it up and I love it. Like no one is just like she's the pastor's wife, like it doesn't come up very often. So I honestly just feel like a normal person who goes to church, and I honestly would like to think that if Brian wasn't the pastor at our church, my volunteerism wouldn't change. Like I would be involved to the same degree as as I am now, even
Mhm.
without the title or whatever. So,
Because like
but yeah, sometimes people just like give you this trust or that's not necessarily warranted, or like this reverence, which is like, oh my goodness, please do not give me reverence, because like 5-second conversation with me and you will be so like disappointed.
it's like, yeah, when people put you on a pedestal and then you're like, I got to somehow stay up here, and then that doesn't feel good. So, do you play the piano, Natalie, or no? Because I think every pastor's wife is supposed to.
Every pastor's wife gets asked, is what I'm learning. You know what is really funny is I'm a total closet piano player.
Oh.
So like I feel like I'm really outing something here because I do
Ooh.
play piano, which is like, but I've never told anybody. I would say just like family members really know that I actually spend a lot of time on the piano. I love it.
Wow.
But yeah, I've never played the piano at our church.
Do you want to
I
start? Is this a way? Like, are you kind of asking in a roundabout way?
No, I never plan to. It's just, yeah, I feel like I already have like the main ministries that I'm involved in. I lead the youth Sunday school class, and that is probably like the part of ministry that I'm most passionate about. And so, yeah, I feel like that's my main ministry, and I'm better there than on the piano at the front. I avoid the front like it's the plague. Like you have no idea. I sit in the last row in the back. I won't even bring up that I'm married to Brian. If it doesn't like, if someone doesn't out me, I won't even say it. I'll just be like, hi, I'm Natalie, and just like meet people. Like,
Yeah.
I'll never mention it. So
Yeah.
usually someone else that
Yeah.
reads. So,
Cool. Cool.
yeah.
So what's it like, like just trying to navigate through all of the stuff that you're doing? So I'm thinking, okay, because I get it, Natalie, like I'm busy too. I've got lots going on too. And people
Yeah.
watching us are going to understand that. So it's like, okay, you know, being a good wife, being a good mom, being, you know, good at your job.
Yeah.
And when I say good, I just mean like doing a decent job, you know, like we don't have to be perfect, but like,
Yeah.
how do
Full
you,
amount.
like, how do you juggle all of that? I'm just like, how does that feel for you? Do you feel overwhelmed some days? Like,
I do feel overwhelmed. I think there's very little downtime in my life where it's like I don't just like hunker down and like watch a TV show very often. So I actually find rest is something that is beyond my grasp. And so to actually, and if I have like an afternoon or an hour where I'm not doing something, I actually feel really guilty about it because I know I'm missing something. It's like, no, this is too good to be true. Like clearly I'm forgetting something. And so yeah, this idea of like shifting down or gearing down to like rejuvenate and replenish and self-care, like that's a world I don't touch. And so, like
okay.
I feel like every moment is spoken for. And I'm sure you feel that way too, right? Where it's like every minute is spoken for. And so like if you're not busy doing something, you're forgetting something. And so
Yeah.
and Brian feels the same way where it's actually like you almost feel this pressure. Like if you take a week of holidays, you feel this pressure to get something out of it that you know you need to get, and you end up not getting it because you feel
Pressure.
that guilt, right? That pressure where, you know, and it's that 4:30 wake up time where you're trying to get yourself back to sleep, but you know the alarm's going to go off, so why even bother? And so it's just that pressure stops you from actually sleeping that 45 minutes, right? Just like the pressure stops you from being able to actually like taste your coffee in the morning or, you know, like those kind of things. So
Yeah, well, I feel like it's interesting hearing because I thought I was a lot like that. But I think that I've been able to some degree, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, but I'm getting better at just being like, mommy needs to sit, mommy needs time, or like just maybe going and like getting a salad from Subway and sitting in the vehicle and just like eating it by myself quietly, maybe like scrolling Facebook or just like having some of that downtime. And maybe like, and sometimes just going for a walk. I suppose though, like, everybody's different because like my downtime is probably not going to be sitting in front of like the movie, but your downtime could be your run in the morning, right?
it is. Yeah. So that is like the Natalie Walter carve out time. And I'll listen to like 2 sermons in the morning back to back. And so my day starts with 2 sermons in my running shoes on the road. And I don't run on Saturdays. So Saturdays are kind of like my day at home and where I'm not following the normal routine. And I honestly feel like it's hard to get into the right headspace on Saturdays. Like, because it didn't start the right way. The day didn't start the right way, but I know my body physically needs to just sit one out, you know?
That's how I feel on Fridays. Fridays, I don't do a workout class, so I don't have to get up at 4:30, and I just feel like kind of off the whole day. It's just
right. It's a really weird thing where you feel off the whole day. And I remember when I started running, my dad telling me like, there's going to come a day if you keep this up where it's going to be hard for you to not do it. And I was like, ugh, like, I was like, I don't know, Dad, like running is so hard, but that was years ago. Right. So I started running when I was, I think 26 or 27. And I was just like, I never believed him. And now I'm like living in that reality where it's like, it's become so habitual where it's, I almost don't know how to start the day without it. So
it's a good lesson there because I know a lot of people like, because I do fitness classes, right? And a lot of people are like, I have to start my fitness class at 6 a.m. Like that just sets my day. Like that just sets the tone. Or if they come at 9 a.m. or whatever, but it just like sets the tone for their whole day. And when they miss it, they really miss it. And I think that for anybody who's watching right now, who's like, I don't know if I can get in an exercise routine. I don't know. If you stick it out long enough, it will become something that you actually start to miss. I promise. Right, Natalie? It will.
Yeah, I genuinely didn't believe that. I remember there was a group of like running moms at one of the churches we worked at. And I was like, that looks like it sucks. Like I would see them go out in the middle of winter and I'm like, there are better things to do. Like,
no. Well, I wanted to ask you, do you still go out when it's like -20, -30, minus 40? Like, where do you draw
So
the line?
the line is at minus 30, just
Okay.
because my eyelashes literally like shut because of the moisture. And so last year I felt like so gross. I kept showing up at church and like I had gotten windburn so bad. And I don't know if it's because my skin is aging or not, but like honestly, my skin felt like a navel orange peel. Like it was
Oh.
so, and I was, what am I doing? Like I have to justify this to people why my face looks like it's severely damaged, right? Like going to like flaking off. It was so awful, but I
Oh.
honestly I love running that much where it's just like I don't know how to not do it. So
Yeah. Well, usually on Saturday mornings, I go for a 10K run. I'm a little bit less intense than you, though, about the cold. Like, I'll go for a ski once the snow comes. I'll ski in the cold. But running, I don't know, it's just a little different. But anyways, like I just found like, yeah, just to just run for about an hour is just feels really good. Like it's just I don't know, it's
well,
like a mind thing. It's a mind thing.
and I think for me the huge draw, like I don't think I'd ever be that consistent if it was indoors.
Mm,
I am an outdoorsy person, and so I think more than the physical activity. Oh, like so there's two things about me where it's like I love being outside and I love being productive.
hmm
And so I think it's the matrimony of those two things that makes like outdoor exercise in extreme cold possible, because like the love for the outdoors and the love for productivity are
hmm
so overwhelming that that's what makes running in the winter run
Yeah,
happen.
happen. Yeah. No, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I've done that too, where I'm outside and like, your eyelashes are sticking together and you get big chunks of ice and you're like, ah, yeah, that just doesn't always work so good. Yeah,
I know, like trying to rub the ice off and all your eyelashes come out and you're like, oh my goodness, this is not good.
that's a little too hardcore, Natalie. Yeah. Well,
So you
it's
haven't had that, gotcha.
yeah, that's good. So, I wanted to ask you, like, just like let's just get into some of the obstacles that you've had in your life clearly. And one thing I want to mention too before we move on is I think the reason that you can cope with all of this stuff, and by the way, like I think we need sometimes to go to therapy, sometimes we need to have certain friends that we can confide in and talk to, sometimes we need to just sit and watch a movie, sometimes like we need these things sometimes. But I think people underestimate the power of exercise. Like, oh, Carla, how do you do it all? Well, I work out twice a day, most days, right? That's how
Yeah.
I do it all. And I don't do it all, by the way. I don't do it all well, anyways. I pull it off, but I don't do it all well. But like, that's kind of like, there's a lot of power in that for mental health, is that activity, right? And that's probably why you haven't gone crazy too, right? Is because you run.
Well, and there are seasons where I dabble in crazy, and then I always have to like pause and be like, okay, let's look at the basics. Am I sleeping right? Am I eating right? Am I exercising? Am I taking my vitamins? Those are the main. So it's like the minute I feel like I'm starting to like lose a grip on my life, it's like I come back to those four things, and if the answer is yes to all four of those things, then it's like, okay, so then I've got a real problem. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it's like, no, I haven't been sleeping well, or I've been overworking, so I'm eating like garbage, stuff like. And so it's like, okay, I can kind of track where it started to go wrong for myself. And then yeah, and then usually it's like, okay, let's get back on track with those four things, like eat well, sleep well, exercise, and take your vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like starting your life on, I feel like, on the best possible footing. And then from that point, it's like, if you're still suffering, then you got a real problem. And
Mm-hmm.
then you need to outsource, like maybe counseling, or talk to a friend, or get someone to help you.
Mm-hmm. Good. So, what are some obstacles, like other obstacles that you've had to face in your life, maybe when you were young or maybe now, that just maybe it keeps coming up or it's just been a bit of a struggle for you? Is there anything like that that's in your life, or is your life pretty smooth, Natalie?
No, it's super not smooth. Yeah, like how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Like,
Well, as deep as you want to take us. I mean, I don't want to pry, but just tell us what you think
no,
would be
no.
helpful.
Yeah, so I guess like there's like one instance from my childhood that kind of like it comes up. And so I'm just gonna say it like pretty quick because I don't want to like trigger anybody or anything. But when I was 5, we had a home invasion. My mom and I were at home, just the two of us, and a man had broken in, and he sexually assaulted my mom while I was in the room. And so
Mm,
that was traumatic, of course. So we would call that an adverse childhood experience, or an ACE. And that's usually like any like traumatic experience between the ages of like 1 and 7. And so what we know from research is that experiences that happen during that timeline affect you long term. And so I think like anyone who knew me at that time, especially my parents, were like, oh my goodness, how is this going to affect this person? Like, what is she going to turn out like?
Mm.
And so it's been like hills and valleys of like pretty good and then pretty awful. But it is an event that does come up from time to time, especially like with my work at the pregnancy care center. I have to revisit that sometimes. Like I said to you before, like we do have a number of sexual assault victims, and so every time those stories come up, like I feel it. I feel it in a personal way.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Like 3 years ago I also had someone who started stalking me, and that's how things started with my mom. Like she was followed for a long time before the assault happened, and so that was like, it just like brought it all back up for me again, where I was like, oh no. Like, and I was like a similar age to her as to when it happened, and I was like, oh man, am I like looking for this? Am I trying to like am I seeing something that's not actually there, you know, or is this actually happening, right? And I think as women we experience those things where it's like, oh man, is this like really happening? Like, am I experiencing like violence or something, you know? And like it almost seems unbelievable because we hear about it, but we never think, oh my goodness me, right? And so like 3 years ago when I had someone following me and being inappropriate, I just kind of like justified it, where I was like, oh, I'm probably like just like looking for inappropriateness. Like totally makes sense. I'm my mom's age when this happened to her. I have young kids, you know, and you kind of like, you know, you kind of talk yourself out of it. But there was one time where this man who was following me, he would encounter my husband and I when we were together, and one time he acted quite aggressively towards my husband, and which was like super inappropriate. And then Brian was like, we have a problem here. And I was like, oh, it's not a figment of my imagination.
Okay.
But it was like that experience was so interesting because I can see how women justify the events in their life, even if they're not responsible for them. I can absolutely see how women are tempted to be like, oh, but I was asking for it, or maybe I did this, or, you know, like it's so weird, even though like we know better, right? Like we know better. We tend to like just fall into that narrative so quickly where it's like, oh, I must be the problem, right? And so yeah, and I do feel like you said, do you have childhood experiences that seem to keep coming up through your life? And that is one that I honestly feel like God brings me back to revisit that, just so I can digest it a little more. And so yeah, I don't know. You know, when you're going into ministry, actually, like when we were in university and we were training for vocational ministry, there was this like, there was this thing that they kept making us do at school. It was like writing out a timeline of your life and like writing out like the good events, the bad events, like just like anything, you know. And it's like the point of the exercise was to see how God moved through those events, or where like what the like, because you know that idea that hindsight is 2020, or things sometimes only make sense afterwards. And so the practice of the exercise, the intent of it was so that you could like go back to your story and really see how God was present. And the problem was that I had this like the sexual assault of my mother's that I was there for when I was 5 was something it was just like the one event I'm like, I'm sorry, man. Like I can see how God has worked in every other way of my life. But that thing when I was 5, like I just don't see the point of it. And as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize like there's maybe not necessarily like, I don't think that God provoked that, or like it happened, and I don't think he's the cause of it at all. But I also am coming to realize that he's not going to waste it. And so I think that experience actually makes me really good at my job. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, I wonder if that would really help you with your job, or if it would almost be a hindrance. But maybe it's kind of both. Like it helps you, but it helps other people, but maybe it's harder for you in a way.
it's a little harder. I am where I have to really watch myself and like really monitor my reactions is with men. And so like just like a genuine distrust of men, pretty much like my whole life, which is crazy. Like if you met the men in my life, you would absolutely conclude that I have the nicest men who surround me. And I honestly think that is something that God has done for me, where he has surrounded me with like just the most gentle, loving, like, I don't know, just like caring, compassionate men. Like, and so I think there's a lot of healing in the relationships that I have with my men friends and like my brothers and my dad. And, where it's just like, I've been surrounded with people who can rewrite that narrative for me, because my natural instinct is like, boys are the enemy. Like
Yeah.
they use their size against you, and
Yeah.
in my line of work, I see that a lot, where it's like women who've been taken advantage of, and it frustrates me and it makes me angry, because it feels so personal. And so trying to like see that God is trying to like rework that storyline that men are the enemy, and that's honestly like, when you talk about like the character of Jesus, the fact that he's a man is something that I had to work through when I became a Christian, where I'm like, oh, but boys are bad. Like they're so
Right.
mean and they always want something from you. And so when your God is man, and man has always been an enemy to you, it's something that you have to work through. And I'm progressing. I'm doing a lot better. So
So do you think
yeah.
that your passion for the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center is somewhat lit up by what happened to you when you were young?
I think so. I think I have a real desire to help vulnerable women.
Mm.
Like that is like, it's almost like in my fabric, where it's like I
Mhm.
can't help myself. And sometimes I get into trouble. Like if I remember being in Ontario once, and there was a guy roughing up a girl, and I could not resist. Like I had to get in there and
Yeah.
like it becomes dangerous for me. And sometimes Brian will see me like have that visceral reaction where I have to get involved in something that's none of my business, because there's a woman being hurt or something, or bullied, and Brian's always like, oh, Natalie, like, please don't get involved. And I'm like, I have to. You
Yeah.
like, I just want, and my mom swears to this day that I'm almost 6 feet tall because of that event. She's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like an evolutionary, like, you adapted to your circumstance and now you're this giant. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how it works, but
Yeah, well, you can intimidate people maybe a little bit easier because you can look down on a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
I try not to, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's temptation, but
Yeah.
yes, I do think that that event really has like, it, like, especially again, like I said, it happened during such formative years, right? So
Mhm.
it really does like impact a lot of it, like, and you can't avoid it. Those things just, they come back, right? And
Mhm.
I think sometimes when you have things that feel impossible to deal with, God will bring you back to revisit them again, just to work through more of it, right? Where it's like, okay, I just want you to have some freedom in this area.
Mhm.
So we might have to come back to it 100 times, but every time you come back to it, you become a little more free, and released from some of the strongholds from that event. So I
Mhm.
see his faithfulness in that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like on that sort of note, what would you say to teens? Like teens maybe who are watching this, or parents of teens, or let's just say teens. Like, what would you say to teens right now? What do you think they need to know? What do they need to hear right now? Because you work with a lot of them.
I
So,
work with a lot of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what would you say to them if they're watching this right now and they're just kind of going on in their life, whatever? Maybe they're struggling with some things. What do they need
Mhm.
to know? What should they know?
I honestly think there's a couple of things. I don't know if I'll remember the second thing by the time I get to it,
Okay.
but one of them is something that, like, when I'm in the schools and we're talking about healthy relationships and life experiences and stuff like that, something that I really try to drill down is how you frame a situation in your life will dictate how you interact with it and how you move forward. So, kind of like Brene Brown talks about, like the narratives, like the stories we tell ourselves. And so I'm always like, I'm always pushing that, where it's like, be careful how you frame certain events, or the narrative that you tell yourself and that you believe in, because like you can actually like thwart your momentum, right? Like you can really like harm yourself depending on what story you're telling yourself about yourself. um so that would be one of them. And then the other thing that I would probably, that I talk about quite a bit with my clients, is this Brian actually said it really well just this week, actually. Like, don't mistake the current chapter of your story with the whole story, like that is the conclusion, right? Like, you can have a really rough chapter, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole life is going to be like that. And so understanding that circumstances change. And so whether you're in a really good place right now in your life or a really difficult place, it's gonna change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so that's like an incredible consolation if you're going through something difficult, where you're like, thank goodness I'm banking on it needing to change. But also like something to be mindful of when everything is going really well, and not to like be pessimistic and be like, oh, the other shoe's gonna fall or whatever, but orchestrate your life and build yourself up in such a way that when the hard things come, you are better equipped to deal with them. And so try to put yourself in the best possible position to weather any kind of storm. And so, making healthy decisions that have your best interest in mind is really helpful with that. Where it's like, if you can, yeah, be in the best place, emotionally, physically, for when those trying times come, you'll endure them better, especially knowing how to like self-soothe and how to deal with anger, how to deal with relationships. Like, if you can already be working on those tools as a teenager, you're going to go places, right? And
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to always be reactive, try to be proactive. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I heard somebody say this week, he said, I think it was Ed Milet. He said something like, we often hear this people say, oh, life is short, life is short, life is short. But he said, life is actually long too. Like, it's short, but it's long. So the things that you do when you're young, you've got a
Mhm.
long time to live with that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not so short that, because sometimes, oh, life is short, go get drunk or go do this or go do that. It's like, yeah, but it's long enough that you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. It's not
Yeah.
so short that you're going to go do it and then, oh, your life is going to be over. Like, it's actually kind of long, and you have a lot of time to like marinate in what the decisions that you make. You know what I mean?
Doing the stew in the bad or the good of whatever
That's
you've
right.
created. I know.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard once, I think it was from the movie Hope Floats. There was a quote from that where it said, childhood is the one thing you spend the rest of your life trying to get over.
Yeah, right?
That's so interesting. Like, I felt pertinent to me,
Yeah.
um, but I honestly like, yeah, it's, man, I have this conversation with my kids all the time where it's like, be super mindful of the decisions you make in your teens, right? Because like I made all the bad decisions in my
Mm.
teens, right? And I was like so scared to have a daughter because I was like, oh my goodness, like if she turns out like me, what a nightmare. Um, but again, like, I mean, there's also learning to be gracious towards yourself, which I think is really hard, right? And so for me
Mm.
to like look back at my teen years and not see me as the villain, but to see myself as just like someone who could have really used like a good big sister,
Mm.
to
Mm.
like help me navigate those murky waters. And so then I see that and it's like, oh man, let me be that big sister to teenagers, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like and it's an incredible privilege because like the girls who come into my office, I can relate to them because I feel like I've been there. Like I never had a teen pregnancy, but that's mostly just by chance,
Mm.
where it's just like I absolutely could have been any one of the girls, that like comes into my office. And it's just like, man, you know what you need is like someone who believes in you. And so
Mhm.
me, please, like let it be me. I'll believe in you.
Yeah.
Just because it's like this now doesn't mean it has to be like this 5
Mhm.
years down the road, 10 years down the road. Like,
Yeah.
start small steps, just start becoming the person you wish you were. So,
You mentioned framework. You mentioned, teens like looking at the framework differently. Can you maybe give us an example? I wasn't sure I totally got that, and I'm wondering,
yeah,
like, is there an example of that?
yeah, I'm trying to think of an example.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I guess like you could see yourself so what I end up seeing a lot of is like teens who are angry at their parents, right? And so they kind of live in the frame of like they are powerless, they're like victims of like their family life, which I mean I totally validate. There are some very difficult home lives out there, like, and I hear about them every single day. But it's like the idea of framing it is like, okay, how are you going to frame the experience? Like, do you always want to be, the victim, or do you want to be someone who has like overcome this, and sometimes we can just like and I only say this like from personal experience, and I'm not saying that this is prescriptive for everybody, but sometimes there's a real temptation to just sit in the victim zone and to like live there. And those people are like, those situations, they're framed in a way where they're powerless and there was nothing they can do. And so like really it just like suffocates any positive experience that they could have. Whereas if you frame it into the realm of like resilience, and that there's like a future and a life that you can have, there's joy to be had out there. Do you want to go grab some of it? That's different, right? So you can, even though there are some situations that are completely out of your control, how you react to them is something that's absolutely in your control. And so that's what I kind of mean by framing things. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think we have to, like adults too, we all have to get better at that. And
Yeah.
like that's probably the thing that bugs me the most. Well, I shouldn't say there's a lot of things that bug me maybe, but when people put themselves in a victim mentality and they live there their whole life, that just drives me nuts, because I'm like, honestly, like there's something that you can do about this. Get out of that. And I understand when people are depressed and stuff, sometimes they really can't get out of it. Like they need some guidance, some help, some resources, maybe some medication. But when people are just stuck, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like it just, yeah. So I'm glad that you said that, because I totally agree. And I also think that sometimes, and I mean, it's hard for you to say this, but maybe you can say this now. Let me know if you can't. But that event that happened to you when you were 5, did that happen to you, or did that happen for you to equip you to do what you're doing now? Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
it's a tough thing, but
well, and that's what I meant. Like when you go back on that timeline that they always make you do at Bible school, where it's like, if you're going into the ministry so you can see where God is at, it's like, again, how you frame it, right? Was that done to you, or is that, like how you frame it is so important. And again, like, the situation, so the event itself was done to us, like my mother and I. However, what we do with that is totally up to us. And so, like one of God's promises is that like he will not squander heartache. He doesn't. And so then I have the opportunity to be like, all right, I want every nickel and dime out of this experience that I can get. Like, let's not let any of it go wasted. And so whatever you can make of it, let's do it. And unfortunately, that means that I revisit it frequently, but also just trusting that the heartache is not in vain, that he's going to use it for his good purposes. And so that part is like, well, the heartache is there, but like can good come out of it? And I think there's an opportunity to yield some good out of just about anything that can occur. I do feel that way. So
yeah. And I mean, when I think, I get a little bit emotional when I think of, what you experienced, like how hard that is. And so it's hard for me to even say, like, there would be a time where if I said, oh, that happened for you, you'd probably want to slap me, right? You know what I mean? Like there probably was a time in your life, or maybe certain situations where you're like, let's not go there. And part of me, I don't even want to go there because I know it's tough, but I feel like there's a lot of people that have gone through tough things that are going to be watching this, right? And I'm just like, man, like if we can have that perspective, and like you said, nothing like our pain, our heartache is not squandered. Like, oh my goodness, there's so much power in just that thought, right? That thought alone, because we've all gone through hard things. I've gone through hard things. You've gone through hard things. And I'm sure you've gone through a lot of other hard things, obstacles throughout your life too. And I just feel like, man, like that is not squandered, because you are already doing so much good, Natalie. Like as you shared that story right away, I'm like, the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center, like the good that you are doing there is probably very much directly affected or related somehow to that experience. And the passion and the compassion that you have for young teens, especially teen girls, is incredible. And honestly, when I see guys or hear about guys that are doing anything mean to women, I will be right there with you. We will go, we'll form a squad and we'll go beat them up.
Someone's got to post the bail. Yeah,
I'm short, but I'm really good at punching. No,
yeah,
but
you look like really fast. Like,
yeah,
I'm slow, but I'm like bigger. But like, you look like you'd be quick. But like, honestly, it also really helps in the church world too, because I understand how quickly the family nucleus can get messed up.
Hmm.
So when someone comes into the church and like their home life is a little messy, I'm like, I am so pro messy. Like you have no idea. Like I'm
Mm,
not pro, like I don't want people's lives to be a disaster. No.
right.
I want honesty about it though. So like I never want people to worry that they're going to shock or scare me. And that is, I think, like another gift that I've received from that experience is like I'm pretty unshockable.
Mm,
I can compartmentalize things, which is not healthy. I understand, but you know, it's I just like I feel like there's nothing too dark or too scary that's gonna make me love someone less when they come into the church. There's no and I feel like I've really been tested on this because sometimes when people hear that part of my story, they'll share something like where I'm like, okay, like that is awful, you know. But honestly, like I feel like you can sometimes just, there's like this shared quality with people who've suffered. There's like a tenderness or something, and you can
hmm.
like feel it off of them. And like, I feel like just sometimes you can sense when someone has had a hard life because there's just something different about them. And I think there's like a unity of brokenness, like brokenheartedness, I guess, that pulls us together where you can almost smell other sufferers where you're like,
Yeah.
ooh, I can sense that your life was hard.
Hmm.
But also, like, I just want to be an advocate for life is hard, but there is so much joy out there to be had, and you don't have to like stay in that hard place, you know, and just lose out on your life. Like, I just think that you know there's a lot of sorrow out there, but God has just filled this earth with his gifts,
Hmm.
and I just want people to feel that. And I think the answer honestly to recovery is through community. I really feel that way, and I feel like you know yeah, I'm going to quote something, but that the local church is the hope of the world. I honestly feel that way.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad you said that because I sense that with you, like community. And that's what Power Fitness is about, is like very much about the community. That's what the church is about. That's what God has created us to form in. He's created us for community, not to be alone, right? So I think we naturally tend to seek that out unless there's a problem. Then when there's a problem, we tend to pull back from community. And that's where it gets the hardest, is when we feel like we're disconnected.
I know, I know. I always feel that too, like especially in like a situation where there's like a marriage that dissolves and then people don't feel like they can come to church anymore. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you guys have never needed church more.
I
Like, let us
know.
love you more. Let us love you better. Like, you
Hmm.
need support, you know? And so it's like, I'm always just like, oh man, like
Hmm.
we're gonna screw things up in life. We just are because we're people and it sucks. But you
Hmm.
know, like never feel like you can't come in through the doors of our church. Like, oh my goodness, like we're a
Hmm.
disaster, we're a mess, but we love each other and it's great and we're awesome at forgiving.
Yeah.
And I can say that because my church has to constantly forgive me for weird stuff that I've said or done. And they're so gracious. And so I've really tested it.
Yeah.
so
You've pushed
so
the
yeah,
boundaries. Yeah.
totally. So if there's room for me, there's room for anybody, honestly. So
And I feel like, I mean, Jesus said in the Bible, like he said, I did not come for the healthy, but the sick, right?
yeah,
And I think so many people think, well, I got to clean up my act before I go to church. No,
yeah,
you need to go
no,
to church right in your mess because God loves you exactly as you are, right in your mess. So the worst thing that you can think of that you did or thought or whatever, God loves you right there. So
oh yeah,
right? Like that's what people have to get. Like I used to think that I had to climb a ladder to God. Like I had to pray, read my Bible, go to church. And often when I talk to people about God, they often say that. They're like, "Well, I don't go to church, but sometimes I pray or I used to read the Bible." You start suddenly coming out so you can tell they feel like I'm judging them right away. They're like, "Oh, I'm not doing the right things." But it's like,
like that down, yeah.
yeah, that's okay. Like, don't worry about it. God loves you right here as you are. And so
Yeah.
just go to church, just read your Bible, just reach out to somebody, just start there and then see what happens. Don't feel like you have to clean yourself up because the fact is we can't clean ourselves up. That's why we need God. If we could clean up ourselves, we wouldn't need God. Jesus wouldn't have had to die on the cross, right? So,
Yeah, for sure. I love there's something like in the Presbyterian Creed that says something like there's nothing that you can do that will make him love you anymore, and there's nothing that you can do that will make him love you any less. And
mm,
I just live in that like almost like a mantra. Like there's nothing I can do to earn more, and there's nothing I can do to blow it, right?
mm,
And so just knowing that you know, another favorite line that we say at our house is like trusting that he is who he says he is. You are who he says you are. you are who he says you are, and he will do what he says he will do. And
Mm.
so just trusting that, like, it's all on purpose. You as a person, you're made with purpose for a purpose, and he doesn't make mistakes. And so
Mhm.
no one's a mistake. And so there's
Mhm.
just better ways to, like, I find there's healthier ways to do things and to navigate through life that have your own best interest at heart, so that you can be really maximizing and utilizing all the tools that are out there, and who you are as a person, so that you can walk around with a little more completion instead of walk around with a lot more grief. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, man, Natalie, I just feel like we're on the same page in so many ways, and I'm just yeah, and that's why like I'm so glad that we've connected with the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center and just connected as people, as
Yeah.
women, as and one thing I want to say too, when I talked about beating up guys, I does I have as much passion to see good, strong men in our communities as I do to see good, strong women. Like I want both of them
Oh,
to be healthy. So when I say I want to beat up, like I'm not against guys, I'm
oh
for
my
guys.
goodness.
Okay,
You
just
see
so
your man following just like drop? No.
yeah, it's like everyone's like, "Well, no," but I'm very passionate about also helping men. Like that's huge for me. So I just want everybody to know that because I know it made it sound like, okay, well, let's just celebrate women and like men are all bad. Like,
No,
yeah,
no, totally. No, and you know what? And I will say this too. So like I did have that one instant, like I've had several instances where I'll have a man who will like admit to having like really hurt his girlfriend right in front of me, and like that visceral reaction, but also recognizing that like he is made by God, and so
hmm
there's an equal opportunity to love that man as there is his girlfriend, right? Like, you know,
but that's
there's
yeah.
like that one saying, like, hurt people.
hmm
And then I just heard recently, yeah, but loved people love people. And
hmm
so it's like, oh, okay, let's reframe it, right? Let's not see this like hurt man hurting men, but how can I love him so that he can love others, right? And so when you kind of see it that way too, it's like, okay, like I honestly think that people become better when they feel safe and loved. And so like let's just keep doing that. Let's make
hmm
people better with that, like keep
hmm
making them feel safe, making them feel loved and valued and seen and heard. And yeah, I think loved people love better.
Yeah. And to forgive. And I mean, if somebody that was hurting a woman, you could say, oh, everybody's welcome in our church except those people. No, those people are also welcomed in our church. Those people are also welcomed, and with open arms, God accepts them and receives them and forgives them and offers them hope and love and all the things that they want and need.
Yeah,
Like that's the power of the gospel. That's the power of what Jesus did. Like that's the power that God has for us, and that's the power that we can have. And I think in ourselves, it's hard.
hmm,
Like there's certain sins or certain things that are harder. Like for you, it's probably a lot harder to look at a guy, that's hurting a woman and trying to forgive him and deal
yeah,
with that. Not that you ever should just stand there and not do anything. Like I believe in, obviously like intervene when it's called for, when you can
yeah,
help somebody. But I feel like that's sometimes the greatest test is the people that you struggle with the most is that
hmm,
God gives you that power to forgive. God gives you that healing. And I feel like, man, that's what the gospel is about. And that's what so much of your message is about, right? It's restoring these young teen girls, particularly, but the boyfriends and the other people that are involved,
yeah,
restoring them and giving them hope and helping them thrive in their life, even though they had a really rough start, you know?
absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
a rough start doesn't mean a bad finish, right? And I think if I had one, one, I don't know, cheer or something like that, it's like, man, don't let a rough beginning dictate, how the rest of the story goes. It's like
Mm,
today is the right day to turn it around. And I feel that like even with people in their health, right? Where it's like if you have lived an unhealthy lifestyle, just even like with like your physical health, it's like, oh man, it may seem so insurmountable to like change your habits, but like honestly, today's the day. You don't have to wait for New Year's, you don't have to wait for your birthday. Like we tend to want to like
yeah. Wait till
stay
like the first of the
yeah,
month or
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
totally. And it's like, you know what? If you're not happy with who you are today and how you're navigating through life and you're like, this isn't good for me, today's the day. Today
hmm
is the right day to do that. It's not tomorrow, it's not on your birthday, it's not New Year's. Just, today. And one of like I think one of my favorite scripture verses um is do not despise the small beginnings, for the
hmm
Lord delights to see the work begin. And I honestly I just feel that where it's like, yeah, any small changes in the right direction. Just one small, and I do this with my clients, just choose one thing, smoke one less cigarette, or, just don't call that guy back, or don't text him, just like one thing, like just navigate, just move one small step further in like the right direction. And then tomorrow, another one and another one. And before you know it, there's a whole journey behind you of where you've come from, and
Yeah.
I love that. I love that people can change. And that's the gospel message. People can change. And I think that's just the best news.
That's so good. But a lot of times they do need help. And so I would say if anybody's feeling right now, like with our message, like they need to take action right now, reach out to me, reach out to Natalie. And Natalie, if they want to reach out to you, where do they go? If they need help with, give me a couple of places maybe.
So I'm a trained grief specialist. So if you looked up grief recovery in Edson, my name and phone number would pop up. So it's Natalie Walter, and my phone number's on there. You can also send me a direct message through that website. And then the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center, we have 3 offices. We have a website. If you just look up Edson Pregnancy Care Center, like Google will get you to me. Like I am Googleable. So there are ways, but other than that, I don't have a huge internet presence. I try to actually stay off the internet as much as possible, just because I really try to, my daughter said it best, you got to manage the kind of feedback you get. And so I actually try to not be on the internet too much. So this podcast is a huge stretch for me. But yeah, there are ways to find me. You can find Edson Alliance Church. Come to church on Sunday.
There you go. There you go.
In the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying not to get into fist fights. Yeah.
No fist fights. Oh,
no, never done that.
Natalie, I am so glad that we had this conversation. And I feel like as we're talking, I'm like, maybe we should do this again sometime, because there's so many things that I didn't even get to. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I know like you're a good speaker, and I know you don't think you are, but you are a good speaker. You have so much to offer from your experience, from your training, from all of the things. And so like, I just want to basically just like celebrate you a little bit right now and just give you a little bit of recognition for all that you're doing. Like, we appreciate you. I appreciate you. Your family appreciates you. Your church, the people appreciate you. And so I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing, the ministry that you're doing through the church, through the West Yellowhead Pregnancy Care Center, and just for our community, for our teens. You have a big load. You've got a lot on your plate. And, I pray for you. I pray that God will uphold you and continue to have his power going through down to you, so that you can continue to finish the work that he's called you to.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. It's really humbling. I know I said this last time when we were recording the commercial. It's hard to think that you'd have anything to say that would be really worth tuning. Like, for me, I'm not speaking for you. You have lots of good stuff to say. But sometimes it's like, oh man, I don't know that I'm necessarily interesting enough to tune into. But so it feels like a real privilege to be on here with you. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Natalie. It was my honor. Appreciate it. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.